She'll give a big hand for errors, laws for mistakes, without.
That's what we've just dealt with, and it's not going to change going into tomorrow's rhubarb.
Paul Stephen Stone, commenting on tomorrow's election. Welcome to What We Should Know, coming to you from Cambridge Community Television here on the 7th of November 2016, a day which could live in infamy. The reason for that is a stolen election, and Paul Stephen Stone has been commenting on the progress of the stealing of the election for nearly a year.
Yes, yes. And actually, interestingly enough, I think November 6th was the anniversary of, the John Fox. That holiday they celebrate in England. But
Guy Fawkes Day.
Guy Fawkes.
Was it, exactly.
He blew up Parliament.
Exactly, yeah.
And it may be very, symbolic that we are around that era, that time in our thinking. Because quite honestly, at some point it's going to start to seem very obvious that the only way you can have a democracy is to fight for it.
I think that's very true. I think the idea of performing one's civic duty simply by going to the election poll, those days are unfortunately long gone, and certainly since the stealing of the primary, since the stealing of the election with George W. Bush in 2000, the first stolen election that in modern times perhaps, but then there was the stealing of the primary away from Bernie Sanders this year, and now the stealing of the election for president by the Clinton operatives.
There's a piece that I wrote, a blog piece called Connecting the Dots, wherein I attempt to put all this into some sort of relevant context or scheme, to look at it in a way that makes sense, because when you suddenly deal with a series of facts, you have to look at them in terms of how do they put together, how can you put them together and make sense out of them. So my attempt to connect the dots, we were talking about
having... get to that?
Sure. We're talking about the election being stolen, so... Oh, it's resisting.
There we go.
Oh, there it is. Okay. No, that's the wrong one. Or unless it's... oh, there it is. So connecting the dots, the frightening underbelly of the 2016 presidential election. What if, over the last 4 years, there has been a plan in place to subvert American democracy? A plan whose total aim was the election of Hillary Clinton to the presidency of the United States. A plan that became a conspiracy as the Clintons gained influence or control over the corporate media, the DNC, Donald Trump, and the top levels of the federal government. A plan that envisioned a final presidential race between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, which is why the media originally made a hero of a narcissistic billionaire buffoon running for president, with all day, every day, all Trump coverage, and why the corporate media turned on Trump the instant he won the nomination, working 24/7 to make him appear frightening to most rational American voters. And so it appeared the plan to anoint Hillary Clinton president of the United States was safely on track and speeding along, with no obvious obstacles in the way. 33 state Democratic parties had signed on to Hillary's money laundering scheme. Her own chairwoman was in place at the DNC. Her hand-picked opponent was mopping up the Republican field, and Hillary had a whoppingly fat bankroll in her back pocket. The fix was definitely on.
Paul, can we get a look at basically about the financing of her campaign as well? I'm sure that I know very little about that, but I think that probably our viewers may not know how much money actually flowed into her campaign and how much could be from the foundation, the Clinton Foundation. Is there a link to that?
Oh no! I mean, trying to figure out the Clinton Foundation's money laundering schemes is near impossible. That's my sense of things. They have used it as a slush fund, so money commingles. There's literally almost $11 billion that was donated to the Clinton Foundation for Haiti that nobody sees any impact from because it wasn't
Nothing's
spent.
been built, or nothing's been.
Yeah, the only thing that's been built on Haiti, I believe, is a resort that's partially owned by Clinton friends. And so you got the Clinton Foundation, which is one thing that was used mostly during her State Department days, I mean, to really suck in the big money. And where it appears very obvious to anybody with half a brain that she was basically selling favors. And she sold
The uranium mine you mentioned one time.
Right.
The Russian uranium deal?
She signed off on a deal with basically a Russian bank, which means that it would be under Russian control, to purchase this consortium of mining interests that effectively had secured rights to 20% of the uranium market, existing uranium market in the world. So she signed off on selling that to Russia at the same time that Bill Clinton was paid $500,000 to talk in a Moscow bank. And I don't know what Russia gave to the Clinton Foundation, to be honest with you. I don't remember that. But most of these relations had big donations for the Clinton Foundation built into them as well. But it was a sleazy business, and Obama comes off looking like either he's incompetent or he just didn't give a shit. But he let her do whatever the hell she was doing and seemed to buy into it. And from all reports, what she was doing was working half-time on the Clinton Foundation and half-time on American business. You know, the AP did that snapshot of a period of, I don't know, a month or two to see what business she was focused on and the people that she saw at the State Department or around the world. The Clinton Foundation connection was very strong. She saw a lot of people that were from the Clinton Foundation donor list. I mean, an inordinate number of them.
So that's completely independent of the email scandal that everyone is talking about that's completely in the news all the time.
Well, it's independent of it, but at the same time, they're intertwined because the reason she took her email to that server in the basement was because she wanted to keep it, all her business secret. She didn't want Freedom of Information Acts to show that she's, doing this stuff, capture the emails and basically point out the criminality of what she was doing. So they are linked. They're not, when there are 33,000 emails that are still missing, supposedly, the ones that she destroyed. And I expect that that's probably what's going to be released tomorrow. There's going to be kind of like bombshells thrown at her tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Yeah. They don't seem particularly concerned about stopping her from winning because they would have presented some of this stuff in time for it to have had some impact. But I think they want to basically destroy her ability to serve as a president because she has no credibility. That's what I think is what they're doing. Even the timing of it makes me think that's what, once she wins, essentially, I don't think she can pardon herself. So
I wouldn't imagine that's possible.
I don't know for sure because who knows?
But Obama could pardon her.
Right, but not once she's taken oath.
No.
So that may be part of the strategy.
yes,
They're trying to figure out how to get her and not get her a pardon, I think.
Oh, really?
Well, that link I sent you, that guy Steve Pichenik, however you pronounce his name, he's somebody with extreme credibility. He's supposedly the fellow that they modeled the Jack Ryan character for those fellows' novels. What's his name? The writer, Clear and Present Danger, and all. Well, anyway, he was the model for Jack Ryan. He's been involved in State Departments for different administrations, and he set up counterintelligence operations for different State Department secretaries of state. He's very deeply situated in the intelligence community, and what he says is that the intelligence community is rising up in anger against what they see is happening, which is, obviously corruption. Justice Department corrupted, the FBI corrupted, and they're angry about it.
And they're all in collusion with one another.
Well, according to this guy, if you look at that video, they're basically feeding files to WikiLeaks. That's what he's claimed, and he's called that the counter coup. He says Clintons have already, basically launched their coup, and now these folks have launched their counter coup through WikiLeaks. So I pray that this guy isn't just sort of going off on his own, but I hope he's reflecting a much larger operation. You hear rumors of FBI agents in revolt, and that was seen as the reason why Comey, brought Hillary back under review. So obviously he's been pressured to let Hillary go. I don't trust it at all as a sign of anybody's honor. I just see this as, Obama owns the justice and the FBI. So it's sorry
corrupt times, and
yeah, you need one honest person with real strength of character to say this is not good, to resign, to charge them with corruption, to do something that could save the country's democracy. I mean, I lit a candle in church for, out of concern for the democracy, our democracy. I don't want to leave a sham democracy for my kids. That's garbage. Who the heck finds that acceptable? That's basically tyranny. If people can,
the people do not have. It's a non-functioning political scandal, continually
and scam.
And scam.
Because the whole thing is predicated on convincing people that we still have our democracy and we still have choice. And they do a pretty good job. 90% of the people believe it. Some of us have woken up. We've seen what liars the media is. We've seen how they've controlled the story that they tell to create the story they want. So it's funny times we're living in, folks.
And the mediocrity, as you mentioned it, they're not fulfilling their responsibility at all and pointing out either that the elections are being stolen or even the facts surrounding the stealing of an election. They're completely in a passive state in reference to this, not fulfilling their jobs, not reporting on what actually happens. But apparently they're in collusion with this entire process.
It just came out that CNN was asked to write the questions in their debate.
Oh my God!
CNN asked the Democrats to write the questions
God, yeah.
that they'd like her to give to Trump.
Wow.
CNN has totally lost any credibility between the Donna Brazile thing. I mean, anybody that gave them credibility before that deserves to have their head examined.
That's Anderson Cooper, isn't it? Isn't he?
He's CNN. He's part of it. I thought he was very strong when he questioned her on her changing points of view. But anyway, they let her get away with murder. Probably literally, too. Hey, if I commit suicide in the next few weeks, you'll know that it wasn't me who committed that suicide. I laugh, but Jesus, it's not funny.
There's a whole list of people close to the Clintons that have committed suicide, right?
Yeah, not necessarily close to the Clintons, but certainly involved with the Clintons and seen as possible obstacle or threat. That's the danger, when you're seen as an obstacle or a threat. So then, going back to connecting the dots, Hillary's got everything set up for her anointing, yeah, to being anointed the Queen of America, the President of the first woman, female President of the United States. And, but then Bernie came along. Bernie struck a nerve with Americans and suddenly went from socialist oddball to populist superstar, which directly threatened the plan for Hillary to win the nomination, which is why the media totally ignored Bernie and turned a blind eye to the momentum of his campaign as it mushroomed, and why Hillary and the DNC, working through the state Democratic parties, were forced to steal primaries they had expected to easily win, and why the federal government had no interest in investigating or halting the rampant election fraud that even the blindest of observers had to have noticed, and why the corporate media, similarly feigning blindness, totally ignored and sometimes refuted the widespread and obvious signs of election fraud, and why the corporate media chose to cancel exit polls once it became clear exit poll discrepancies were really revealing the fraud and endangering the plan, and why the corporate media refused to show what really happened at the Democratic convention, ignoring all protests and only covering fabricated displays of non-existent party unity. The media was like the PR arm of the Democratic National Committee. It was embarrassing.
But it's true.
Nobody in America knows that half the convention walked out. Bernie's delegates were
They didn't record it.
They didn't
refused to
record it, and then what they did. This is a fabulous story. What they did was they hired actors to sit in seats, and they also, because at first when the delegates they were gonna basically wear T-shirts as a sign of protest, and somehow the DNC found out about it. So they had all these kind of glow-in-the-dark T-shirts, and the DNC's people all had these shields. You held it up, and there was a slit for the eyes, and you blocked out the people behind you. So they basically covered the whole thing up, physically covered it up. And nobody reports on this. This is in front of the press is there to see it, and it never gets reported. God. What kind of a media do we have? They're toadies.
Frightening.
It is frightening. They're toadies. They're kissing the Hillary's ass and the DNC's ass. And that's it. They all think they're on the bandwagon. They're all on the gravy wagon. So that's what you're dealing with.
They're all being taken care of in their professional
Yeah.
positions.
Yeah.
Because they're in cahoots with these operations.
Well, the media gets a fortune from the advertising, during this period. So this is actually all this ridiculous, rampant name calling fits right into the media.
It's just theater. It's just
right, but it's expensive theater, and the media gets a fortune. NFL advertising, Maggie Hassan and Kelly Ayotte, whatever her name was, they were basically the two biggest advertisers on the football when I saw it 2 weeks ago.
yeah.
So that's expensive, very expensive. So that's the state we're in. We're not in the state of New Hampshire. We're in the state of corporate America, and
It's horrific.
it is horrific. It's our fault. We've fallen asleep. We've allowed things to happen that never should have happened. It was on our watch, and we had the game taken away from us, and we're waking up to it now. Bernie scared the hell out of these people. All of a sudden, you had a real honest populace to hold up in comparison to a dishonest populace.
Spoke exactly to the issues, clarified the issues, had great arguments,
Yeah.
had a path to change,
Yep.
had a lot of popular support, had the youth, the millennial generation, which, by the way, the millennials are the most powerful, projected to be the most powerful generation over the next 30 years, politically.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a possibility, then
They had a real education.
They really did.
Yeah, they were shown exactly what this corrupt establishment system is all about. They know that the system is corrupt. It took me 70 years to learn that it's a corrupt system, or at least more corrupt than I ever thought. So I learned that lesson, and they learned the lesson in the first time out of the box. So yeah, I bet it'll resonate for quite some time. There are 20 million people probably that know their vote was made meaningless by the way Bernie was marginalized during the primary. That's 20 million people. Is a lot of people.
it is. Seeing their vote completely discounted, seeing their candidate completely shoved to the side. With 46% of the primary and caucus vote, that's what they say that Sanders had.
Yeah, and he probably had more than she had. He
Probably did.
had like 54, I think somebody said. It's I don't know. It's totally unacceptable, unforgivable. It's criminal. There are people that should be locked up. The people who attacked the protesters at Standing Rock, they should be locked up. Obama should have sent the U.S. Marshals to protect those people. Instead, we're going to let things sort themselves out for a few weeks. Horrible. He's totally disaffected. He could care less about the people who are getting attacked by dogs, they're getting maced, they're getting tased. I don't know. Obama is absolutely total disappointment.
Yeah, the question can be asked, and I'm sure that Paul Stone is asking this question to all of us. Why is the expectation that Hillary Clinton will do so much for women when Barack Obama did so little for the black population in America? He was elected, Barack Obama was elected with the idea that he would bring back the era of Martin Luther King, where justice and the right of a minority to move forward on the idea of equality. And at the end of his administration, the obvious racism of the establishment against the blacks, against the black population is more than obvious. So why, if one were to make the comparison, why would women in America feel this tremendous allegiance to a candidate like Hillary Clinton and what she ostensibly would do for the women of America? I don't understand this dedication.
Well, I want a woman in the White House. I want Jill Stein.
It's true.
You don't need to have a woman. You need to have a good woman. You don't need to have a woman. You need to have a woman with integrity. The problem with Hillary is she has no integrity. Her character has been shaped by avarice. Her feelings about any deaths she may have caused are totally non-existent, which kind of makes her a sociopath. Whereas Jill Stein is not going to bomb any. They're not going to have collateral damage with a woman that won't send out drones because she's not sure that it's the right way to approach the whole war situation. And Jill Stein will go for universal health care, for tuition-free college, for state universities. She'll do a lot of things. And the first thing on her agenda will be climate change. That should be the first thing on the agenda because the planet is basically under attack. It's not just projected to be bad; it is bad. Hurricanes are stronger, droughts are longer, forest fires rage longer. It's just not sustainable, and we need to get things back in balance. And Hillary, she was basically pro fracking, and she was pumping the fracking. Pounding the fracking drum during her statehood, Secretary of Statehood. So Jill Stein is a woman, but she's a woman whose ideas really serve humanity. If we're not serving humanity in this world where every time you move an elbow, you bump into something, if we're not doing that with an eye out for humanity, we're going to really do a lot of damage. And we've done a lot of damage in our blundering around this planet. It's really pathetic. So,
don't you feel that, Paul? Don't you feel that the stolen election in 2000, in which Al Gore was defeated, and in which climate change was the primary issue from his point of view, and that happening again in 2016? Projecting that nothing will be done to change the impetus of global warming until possibly 2024. Isn't that's 24 years lost in this incredible?
Yeah, it is. Somebody should be sounding the auga 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 alarm. It's ridiculous, but we're walking around as though the planet is just a day at the beach. It's perfectly okay. Whatever happens is okay. We're going to have a lot of sun, a little cloud. Whatever happens is fine. We're absolutely the most mindless species on the planet, and the most destructive, which is a dangerous combination.
It's true, unfortunately.
Yeah, but what's happened in the last year gives me great hope, because Bernie has basically enlivened a point of view and a community. I mean, there are a lot of people whose names I recognize on Facebook who, one way or another, I bumped into. And I think we're all very much aware of what's been going on. So you're not going to have change until people know what's going on. So I think that may be what happened mostly this particular cycle, which is a good thing. It's better than continuing in the status quo and not knowing what the hell is causing all this chaos. She's going to have us in war continuously. You know,
I think that's true. Yeah.
I try to explain that I'm concerned. I mean, people talk about being afraid of Trump. I'm more afraid of Hillary than I am of Trump, because I think.
Why is that?
Well, Hillary has the power and the she has the temperament to get us in war. She's very hubristic. She's very ego-driven. She wants to prove that she's as big a man. She's got bigger balls than anybody else on the playground. I think Trump is going to have a lot of things he's going to have to sort of figure out. She won't. She's been in that White House before. And I think he'll bump into a lot of corners that she won't. She'll get things done easily if she has the congressional support. That's the other question. If she stays in and you've got a Republican House and a Republican Senate, that may be exactly what we want. Maybe this is the term where we want nothing to happen. Remains to be seen. I'm trying to take a long-range view here because people argue about the wasting of a vote. I want to make sure that my vote helps the Green Party get a little more credibility, get a little bit more substance, get a little bit recognition, which once they have enough, the government will recognize them as a party and give them matching funds. And given what the Green Party ordinarily spends, the Green Party will feel like it's rolling in dough, but may have actually the ability to compete. They don't right now. And in fact, the only reason Jill has done so really well this time, is because of Bernie. She very artfully injected herself into the Bernie dialogue. I noticed that early on.
Yeah.
And tried to show that there was a natural affinity. And Bernie just wasn't going to have any of that. He wasn't going to be romanced or, enticed. He could have joined Jill, and I bet you they would have won in a fair election, in a non-rigged election. But he wasn't interested.
Well, I think as far as Sanders is concerned, the battles that he's had to get elected mayor of Burlington and then elected into Congress and then elected into the Senate show that he is an extremely astute politician and knows a lot about tactics and can read the minds of the electorate well, and has a terrific ability to create coalitions. So I give Sanders a tremendous amount of credit for being a realist as well. However, what I don't understand is his apparent and very strong candidacy and surrogate efforts for the Clinton campaign. I haven't really understood that.
Well, if you look at it in terms of a storyline, a story arc, there's this incredible rise and a very powerful movement out that all of a sudden just fell like that to earth. Lost all its fuel, lost all its gas, and just fell flat. And that's exactly how it seemed. For whatever reason, she was able to co-opt him. Either she threatened him with something that he valued, and I wouldn't put it past her to, have that be the life of a family member. Other people have speculated that. Or she just, used, Schumer, to threaten that he wouldn't have any of his powers in the Senate when this was all over.
Yeah.
So whatever it was that he, basically gave up to, we'll never know. But something happened that totally changed what he was planning. He had everybody geared up to go to the convention and raise hell, to fight for things. He thought he would have he never had a chance because the whole thing was so rigged against him at the convention and against the Bernie supporters. These folks were absolute, they were like communists. They had such party control, it's ridiculous. And they should all be, I'd love to see them go to jail, I really would. I'd love to see Debbie Wasserman Schultz trying to figure out a color scheme for her cell. That's what I would like. That's what I want for Christmas, Lord. Oh, God.
Shall we get back to the blog?
Oh, sure. Okay, so, which is why Hillary had a clear path to stealing the Democratic nomination, and why nobody in the corporate media found it newsworthy to look beyond the pro-Hillary bias revealed through the release of the DNC emails. What the hell was the email? What were the emails saying, and what did the emails infer? Which explains why the theft of the Democratic nomination went unreported by the press. They didn't want to know. If you find out somebody is cheating, what happens ordinarily? They get disqualified.
Of course.
The Russians were disqualified down in Brazil. Nobody mentions the fact that it was proven that there was cheating, and she should be disqualified. This thing, everybody acted as though there was a common agreement that Hillary was the nominee.
Yeah.
You know, of course, Hillary's the nominee.
It was a foregone conclusion.
Yes, and everybody had to act like that. Even if you found out she was cheating,
Right.
even if you found out that she stole votes or she suppressed votes, we've already made this agreement. Why are you making trouble for us now? This is all agreed to. So
The laughter on my face is bitterness. It's the reality of a person who is perhaps a sociopath, who does not shirk from doing whatever's necessary, pushing out of the way anyone who challenges in any way her path to the White House. But even more frightening than that is the fact, as you mentioned, Paul, that the entire press seems to have been co-opted in this entire scheme.
and the government. And the government.
And the government as well.
Yeah. Yeah, very effective coup. Yeah.
Calling it a coup is valid in that, to that extent. Everyone was in on the fix.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a coup if it wasn't a coup. To me, when somebody basically says, we don't care what the people voted, this is the candidate who we say has won. When that happens, you've got someone taking control of your government. It's as simple as that. And maybe you think that Hillary has got some good policies and you don't mind having her in control of the government. That doesn't matter, because the next guy may be terrible. And they're not going to let go of that control. Once they have it, why would they let go unless they were brought to pay some price for having done this? And they're not. Nobody's paying a price. So, folks, I do think that the best thing you could do tomorrow is vote for anybody but Hillary. I will take Donald Trump over Hillary, though as I said, I would vote for Jill Stein first before anybody. That's my honest thinking.
I can't agree there. I can't agree because, Paul, because I feel that Trump is a complete narcissist. I believe he would have real difficulty negotiating anything.
Oh,
But
I think
of course,
if
the election is stolen, I believe that whoever's in control will be doing the negotiation. It certainly won't be Trump then, because of the fact that the election was stolen.
It'll be stolen by Clinton if it's stolen. I mean, Trump he's not part of the establishment. He's not. And, well, the issue, I assume, and I don't blame you for having this point of view, is I find Hillary, what she did in Nicaragua, what she's done in Libya and elsewhere, is just martial. She's a warrior. And I think she goes, we're bombing 7 countries right now. Nobody realizes that. We're bombing 7 countries.
Yemen is one of them. Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan.
Yeah, and Yemen we're doing at the request of Saudi Arabia. Why can't Saudi Arabia do its own bombing? We gave them all those weapons.
Right.
Why would an American have anything to do with bombing a Yemen civilian or
And
soldier?
they've got no military infrastructure, so what they're bombing there are basically civilians.
Yeah. Yeah. I knew a fellow, name was Charlie Clemens, who had, he was a Air Force fighter, a bomber fighter, flyer, excuse me. And when we went into Cambodia, when we expanded the bombing area to Cambodia, include Cambodia, he refused to fly. And they ended up sending him back stateside, and they sent him to a mental institution. The only thing they could figure to do was to say that he must have been crazy for refusing to fly. So he's 10%, he always says he's 10% crazy and 90%.
That's heroic.
It is heroic.
That's absolutely heroic.
Yeah. I met him at, in fact, I went to work for him at a human rights organization right here in Cambridge. The
It was a
UUSC.
clandestine war, wasn't it, with Cambodia? There was no aggression whatsoever from
It was just
the-
Kissinger trying to clean up what he thought were supply lines. So he'll bomb the country because we can. They're not going to come back and bomb us. You know, Laos was the most heavily bombed country in history. We spent like over 2 million tons of bombs
Oh my God.
to Laos. So when Obama was there at Laos, we promised them $100 million to clean up some of that mess.
Wow,
This has been there for 20, 40, 30 years, I don't know, a long time. I didn't even know we bombed Laos.
Okay.
Oh boy, yeah, no, we were just absolutely insane in that era.
Well, there seems to be an extension of our destructiveness, within the established leadership. Going to war against Vietnam, and then extending the bombing into Laos and Cambodia, the incredible destruction, civil and in infrastructure. But that is only one part of it. The Vietnam conflict. There's been 30 years of war in South America, and then in the Middle East. 6 countries, you say, are now being.
We're bombing
bombed.
7 right now.
So there's an incredible destructiveness, propensity for massive violence that may be turned against the population of the United States. The idea of police killings against blacks, that is just a symptom. If police can kill blacks, they can kill anyone. And
You know, if I could draw
certainly,
make a point here, there's a relationship between the police killing blacks and then police basically attacking and brutalizing protesters in North Dakota. In both cases, they're agents of the state, the corporate state, and what they do is basically pummel anything that seems to be a threat to that corporate state. I couldn't believe how open they were about how the nasty things they did there, but they knew Obama wouldn't do anything. So the blacks, I don't think it's never been a racial thing in the police's mind in society. They are just a lower economic subgroup, and they're seen as a threat, an economic threat. In Ferguson, they basically had city government was basically relying on having enough poor blacks caught by speeding or whatever,
Right.
So they paid fines that got money for the city. So they had their livelihoods at stake essentially when they had to go out and find people. But that's an example of a municipality that's feeding, on the weakest people. But so I always thought of it as an economic. That's reality. If you're the guy on the lowest rung of the ladder, you're the one that's most anxious to climb up. And we got to keep you down on that ladder. So on that rung.
you mentioned Ferguson, and you mentioned how a local economy can be manipulated so that the poorest are paying the heaviest financial price. Reminds me of Bill Clinton's welfare reform and how that was manipulated to have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of poor minorities stripped of their ability to even maintain their families or rent or any type of semblance of family order, and getting purged from roles and forcing them into taking jobs where they had no access to daycare or health care, and still to this day don't, many of them.
Right.
So the idea of the Clintons as being benefactors of the poor and the needy, Bill Clinton, I think, proved that that's not part of his agenda.
But you know, it's not unconnected that he also was responsible for the mass incarceration of millions of people that wouldn't have been in jail otherwise. And what happens when you start to take away, you know, a subgroup's ability to make a living is they revolt. And that's why you've got to come down on them hard, and you want to make sure they understand this is what's going to happen. So you're pretty unmoved by their plight. You know, it's very dehumanizing to have an enemy. So ultimately, I think it's our economic system that's at the heart of all this really unpleasant stuff. You know, obviously the treating the Indians as though you have a right to violate the treaties and take the land. I mean, this is just like we were, you know, long ago.
It hasn't changed in 300 years.
Where we abrogate whatever we gave our word to, we totally abrogate it because they're just savages. They're not Christians. We shouldn't hold ourselves responsible for keeping our words. You know, this is amazing. And that Obama would be somehow or other. One day that when all this stuff was going on, he apparently signed 2 more pipelines to go through. And you know, there are fires all over the place from pipeline leaks and eruptions.
That's true.
And states of emergency. We're living in a world where we don't seem have any concern about the consequences of our actions. And what you end up doing is you end up creating lots of consequences when you don't give a shit what, you know, when you just want to have something and you grab for it and you don't care about any unintended consequences that might arise. You make a mess. And that's exactly what we do. The problem is the person that made the mess has the money, has the most money, and can keep the government and anybody else at bay for long enough to make his mess as big as he wants.
My God, it's the James Cagney movie, but it's now not on film. It's reality, isn't it?
Yes.
The thugs, one thug after another.
Yeah, he danced in that. He was a Union chief, but he was a dancer and he sang. It's kind of a fun movie, as I remember it. Maybe terrible now to see it, but never steal anything small.
Well, that seems to be what the Clinton
oh my God,
family is.
You have to give them credit. They probably make the Borgias look like, you know, real small time grafters. These guys have set a totally new standard for thievery and for political chicanery. As I said, I prayed at church today for an election that was honest and fair, without any chicanery or malfeasance. Good luck. Good luck.
We'll see tomorrow.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. I'm going to find myself an air raid shelter or someplace to hide out. Maybe I can stay there a few weeks.
Many of our audience has not had the opportunity to read the rest of your blog, Paul. Shall we continue with that?
Sure. So that's why nobody in the corporate media found it newsworthy to look beyond the pro-Hillary bias revealed through the release of the DNC emails, which explains why the theft of the Democratic nomination still remains unreported, and why no one, not the DNC, not Democratic Party leaders, and certainly not the corporate media, would question whether Hillary's election fraud, coupled with the DNC's proven bias, should disqualify her as the Democratic nominee. You can go back, and why a highly unpopular candidate is the Democratic nominee. crowned by the corporate establishment to challenge a man whose temperament and presidential credibility is being torn to shreds daily by the corporate media.
What is this?
Oh, that's a poster showing how somebody who's absolutely has no public appeal can draw no crowds whatsoever. That's formerly America's #1 campaign. No shows sold out. Best of both worlds, 2000. I can't even read that. A last-ditch Valentine.
To younger voters.
Extended in spite of popular demand. Big and small operations welcome. So that's what that's about.
That's cool.
Meanwhile, one has to wonder about the federal government's role in the plan. More specifically, one has to ask how high the conspiracy goes, and why nobody stopped Hillary when it became clear she was violating the terms of her agreement to keep the Clinton Foundation at arm's length while working as Secretary of State, and why the government ignored Hillary's obvious and pervasive election fraud, even though the White House received many complaints and petitions for help. And what did Bill Clinton say to Loretta Lynch in their secret 30-minute conversation? A conversation that totally undermined the integrity of Lynch's Justice Department. And who was it in the Justice Department who made the decision not to indict Hillary for her obvious misdeeds in setting up a private server and carelessly exposing national secrets? Was it the same person at the Justice Department who last year stopped the FBI from investigating the Clinton Foundation? I'm missing an N. The same person, perhaps, who pressured James Comey to legally vindicate Hillary in July? Speaking of which, how could the Justice Department or any reasonable human being view the erasure of thousands of subpoenaed emails as anything less than the intentional destruction of evidence?
That's a terrific question and insight.
And why didn't the FBI put Hillary under oath when they interviewed her?
What? Clear negligence. Obviously.
And who decided to remove Bernie's Secret Service protection while he was still a candidate, leaving him and his wife suddenly vulnerable while surrounded by enemies? That happened at the Democratic Convention. And why would President Obama endorse Hillary Clinton while she was still under FBI investigation? Elizabeth Warren too, for that matter. So where does that leave us now? Frightened. Frightened for our democracy, frightened of our government and the thugs who seem to have successfully mounted a nonviolent coup d'etat. Uncertain. Uncertain about who we can trust. Uncertain if we can ever again trust the press, our government, our political leaders. Waiting. Waiting for a special prosecutor. Waiting for someone to stand up to the cabal. Waiting for the country to wake up to what is happening. Waiting for the Clintons to get arrested. Waiting for a concerned citizenry to say enough is enough. And then one more phrase. And angry.
It's terrific stuff, Paul.
Oh, thank you. I'm just amazed that, I sent emails to Mother Jones. I thought Mother Jones might have the balls to check it out. David Korn, I think his name is. As I said, I sent a series of letters to the Times and to the Globe editors. Nobody seems to have any journalistic integrity, self-respect. They've basically given up. There's a guy who's a reporter for the Daily News in New York, Sean King, I think his name is. Mm-hmm. And he's been a voice of sanity and honesty in that. And he's been almost the only journalist that I would say has shown any integrity. So, and they know, some of them know when they tell you a story, they know that they're only telling you the side that their corporate masters have allowed to be above, in the light of day. Most of these political stories now, like the true, honest election stories, most of it is hidden, sub rosa. But I do think, there's no question in anybody who's intelligent or has intelligently looked into the situation that Bush stole the elections of 2000 and 2004.
It'll come to light that Hillary Clinton and her cabal have stolen this one as well.
history will not be kind, I believe. But she's going to destroy any evidence that she can. She'll put it in a burn bag,
Of course.
and certain individuals will end up in that same burn bag.
So the question basically I think that you're asking is, how are we going to prosecute, how is the American public going to get our country back, get our political system back on track, and what could the path to this change then entail? Certainly through the information and the politic of Bernie Sanders, we know that there's a tremendous interest publicly for a healthcare system that works, a single-payer healthcare, for tuition-free public education, for effective daycare, payable, affordable daycare for working parents. I think these three issues would
and,
go...
and a minimum wage.
And a minimum wage, exactly, of at least $15.
Living wage.
And attached then to the inflation, the rate of inflation. I think these 4 points would go a long way in reestablishing some type of equity for tens of millions of Americans. The question is how to go about achieving these political goals around and through a corrupt system. Where would the strategy be productive?
A corrupt system that owns the media. That's the problem.
I think that's true.
That's the problem. Unfortunately, they've allowed, that's another thing the Clintons did, they signed the bill to allow consolidation of ownership of the media. And so it's estimated that there are only 6 major owners of most of the media in this country. 6.
My God.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It's worse than the seed business with Monsanto.
Right. So Clinton signed that bill. It used to be you couldn't have a newspaper and a TV station.
That's true.
In the same.
Up until 30 years ago, it wasn't possible, I believe.
Yeah, Clinton signed a bill that allowed it to be all to change. So it's not like the old times where you could print a flyer and say rebel. We have to find a way to get the message out online. It's the only way to do it now.
Well, I think you seem to be using very effectively your expertise in bringing forth these blog posts, Paul.
Well, I hope so, but the way Facebook is set up now, it's not difficult for someone like me to do that. At the same time, Facebook has a political bias as well, and they put people into what's called Facebook jail, where suddenly you discover...
Oh, really?
Yeah, your posting rights have been rescinded. You can only post to your own...
That's
wall.
interesting.
Yeah, no, this has been a phenomenon. Google and Facebook are both... I'm not saying that involved, but they're definitely involved. They have a bias. Google more so because the guy who's the owner of the chief is part of the Democratic establishment, and he's been involved in getting his...
Not surprising.
Yeah, his influence sent up to Hillary. So, not a pleasant story to share with you folks. And, I just feel like I've done everything I can do, honestly, as a citizen, to try to sound the alarm. And I try to be creative doing it because you can you can wear out your welcome in no time if you're just a town scold.
It's true.
Yeah. So anyway, it is what it is.
24 hours before the election and
Right.
28 hours before the election results, 29 hours before the election results begin tomorrow at 8 o'clock on 11/8/2016. The news that we have, that Paul has presented, show clearly that the election has been rigged. Not surprising that Donald Trump is speaking about this on a daily basis and he's accurate in that depiction of what has actually happened, beginning with how the primaries were stolen from Bernie Sanders.
He hasn't used that information very artfully. I've been a little bit disappointed in how he's framed a lot of issues that he had the right to frame. If he had talked about the fact that it was rigged, and not just, these people are smart enough to know that the whole thing was rigged, from the purging of voter lists to the mysterious switching of party registrations, things like that. This thing was a wide scale. And also, just recently it was revealed about those people that were basically putting provocateurs in his rallies.
Oh, I'm sure
they were
that's the
inciting
case.
violence, these people.
Oh, I'm sure that's the case.
Yeah. I mean, that's Project Veritas, which is relatively discredited, but in this case looks like they did an honest undercover job. A very interesting undercover job. But
Well, the state is not above using violence against any person, any group. The state is not against that, and it's proven this.
challenges the status quo.
Right.
If you look at Nevada with that convention, state convention, where they had the police lined up in front of the stage, that's not a very good use of police. It says what the reality is. The state is not going to tolerate dissension beyond a certain point. So it's very difficult. You asked the right question. Where do we go from here? You've got people whose political sensibilities have been stirred. You've got people who have stolen an election and are about to steal another election, I believe. And you've got a populace that is still being told that they're participating in a two-person race, and these two people are horrible choices. Horrible choices. Do you want poison or do you want to be shot? Do you want vomit? Do you want diarrhea?
That's the criteria. Paul, thanks ever so much for being here again. And
Thank
good
you
luck.
for having me. Sorry to end up with those very unpleasant